It's no secret that people love Death Note. After all, according to myanimelist.com, even years after the release of its final episode, it's still ranked as the most popular anime out right now. Now I know Death Note can be divisive. Some people think it's the greatest thing ever written, others think it's severely overrated. And while I'll admit that I definitely fall more into the former camp than the latter, one thing I think is undeniable is that the first episode of Death Note is near, if not absolute, perfection. I've seen Death Note several times now, and upon each rewatch, I'm always struck by just how captivating the first episode is. However, now that I'm older and have learned a bit about writing and the science of storytelling, I'm finally able to see what exactly Death Note does that makes its introductory episode so phenomenal. Let's take a look, shall we? Before we get into the specifics of Death Note, we need to first analyze what exactly makes a competent introductory episode in the first place. The objective of a first episode is threefold. 1. Establish the main characters. 2. Establish the world these characters live in. 3. Establish the premise of the story and supply a hook to engage viewers to continue interacting with your series. Death Note does all of these near seamlessly. But how? Let's go one by one. Death Note is a series with several important characters that are central to the plot. However, in this first episode, only 2 of the main characters are introduced. The pretty boy genius, Light Yagami, and everyone's favorite death god, Ryuk. Now, introducing your characters is about more than just telling the viewers their names. The mark of a truly successful character introduction is when a writer is able to establish a character's personality, as well as what their function is in the story, with minimal exposition. Death Note does this in several subtle ways. For example, let's take a look at Light's introductory scene.
Listen and follow voice of God, and abundance you will get.
それで私何もしてないのに急に切れてきて。それで。
八神くん、どうしました？今の文章の和訳をお願いします。
神の教えに従うべし。さすれば、海の恵みは豊かになり、嵐はやってこないだろう。
The high school student sitting by the window is actually a pretty common shot in anime. Often used to show the protagonist daydreaming about the potential life they could be living outside of the prison that is their school. However, Light puts this in sharp contrast by looking the other way, inward toward his delinquent classmates, accepting reality for what it is and judging them for their misbehavior. Right after this, he's chosen by his professor to translate a verse from the religious text the class is reading for the day. Follow God's teachings. Then the favor of the seas will become abundant, and the storm will not come. Foreshadowing of Light's ideology. From this, we get everything we need to know about Light. He's intelligent, hyper-aware, and most importantly, very judgmental. But that's not all. This first episode is riddled with small details that help establish Light as a character. Like how getting the top score on the national practice exams establishes that he really is one of the most intelligent people in Japan. Or how when he goes into the store to kill Takuo, he picks out a Shonen Jump equivalent magazine as a cover, establishing that despite his intelligence, he's still just a kid. It's small things like these that really help you understand who Light is as a character, without the author having to throw it in your face. The writer trusts that you'll pick up on these things, almost subconsciously, and as a result, you have a more intimate understanding of the character. I could go on and on about how well Light is established in this first episode, but before I do, let's take a look at Ryuk. Now, Ryuk is actually the first character introduced in the episode, which is fitting, because he is the alpha and the omega of this story. Without Ryuk's intervention, none of the events of Death Note can proceed. Ryuk is also a far less complex character than Light, and as such, he needs less screen time. His sole motivation for his actions is boredom. He has no moral qualms about anything he plans on doing, and all he wants is a good time. In that way, the show expertly establishes Ryuk as the yin to Light's yang. Upon a rewatch of the episode, you'll notice the segue to introduce Light, after Ryuk's character introduction is complete, is done through a zoom in on their eyes, establishing that they're unified in their ability to see the world in a way different from those around them. However, you'll also notice that when Light and Ryuk are on screen for the first time, they're actually juxtaposed, signifying that they're not truly allies. Although they are similar in their boredom and dissatisfaction of the state of the world around them, that is where their similarities end. Light wants change through order and tries to ascend into godship. Ryuk, who's already a god, wants change through chaos and descends into the human world to become the demon whispering in Light's ear. Finally, at the end of the episode, everything we think we know about our characters is perfectly reinforced in their confrontation during the final act. Light establishes he wants to become the god of the new world by erasing criminals. Ryuk establishes that he's just along for the ride, providing us, as the viewers, with a crystal clear understanding of their personalities and motivations, which helps frame the events to come. So what exactly is world building? Wikipedia actually offers a pretty succinct definition. World building is the process of constructing an imaginary world in which one develops an imaginary setting with coherent qualities. When it comes to world building, what's important to remember is that it's so much more than just establishing the locations and historical events that happen in your universe. In reality, the most crucial part of world building is establishing the tone of your world. For example, one thing people often get wrong about Death Note is that they think it just takes place in the real world. But that's not quite the case. The world of Death Note is actually painted as a dystopia. This is established on an artistic level with the heavy use of muted colors and ominous, nearly gothic music, but it's also done incredibly well on a literary level. I'll show you how. First, let's define a dystopia. An imagined world or society in which people lead wretched, dehumanized, fearful lives. If you noticed, nothing good happens in the first episode of Death Note. In every scene that involves humans, there's some form of victimization or debauchery. We start with the delinquents in the classroom, move on to the news of all the murders that happened in the city, then there's a hostage situation, then there's bullying, then there's the attempted rape. It's a non-stop onslaught of wretched people doing wretched things. It's dehumanizing, and importantly so, as it helps us understand why Light sees the world the way he does. My personal favorite example of this is here. In this scene, the writer has the kid in the green shirt being bullied by this other kid, establishing him as a victim. Then, in the very next scene, the victim is seen berating his mother. By doing this, the author tries to suggest to us that there truly is no one above judgment in this world. Aside from Light, of course. In addition to establishing the world of Death Note, the writer does a phenomenal job of establishing the magic system. For those of you who might not know, a magic system is a set of rules that regulate the magical effects that can be produced in a fictional setting. In Death Note's case, that would mean showing how exactly the Death Note actually works. Now, Death Note is a perfect example of less being more. For example, there are actually over 50 rules that govern exactly how the Death Note works. But to respect our attention spans, the author only doles out the 5 most important rules during this first episode. Not only this, but directly after the rules are briefly explained to us, he gives us a working example via the hostage situation, thus reinforcing our understanding of the world. When it comes to world building and magical systems both, the name of the game is show, don't tell. As far as detailed exposition regarding the logistics of your world goes, It should feel like a reward for the viewers, not a chore. Give your viewers an exciting taste of the possibilities that exist in your world, and then tell them all the details once they're actually invested in your story and characters. Okay, so we covered character introductions and world building. The final and most important piece of a strong introductory episode is the hook. That is the central premise of your story, and why viewers should spend time with your series. Now, Netflix sums up the first episode of Death Note as: bored but brilliant high school student Light Yagami suddenly finds himself holding the power of life and death in his hands. And while accurate, I think this misses the mark just a bit. At its core, I believe what makes Death Note, and specifically this first episode, so intriguing is not just the power of the Death Note, but more so examining what the responsibilities would be for someone who suddenly came into this power. For example, a lot of people would think that the hook to the show is here, at 7:20, when Light uses the Death Note for the first time and ends up saving the people in the hostage situation. But in reality, the real premise and hook is here, at the midway point of the episode, when Light stops the attempted rape. These two situations are different in two major ways. The hostage situation was ultimately a controlled situation. The cops were there, and likely could have handled the situation on their own. Also, from Light's perspective, this was more of an experiment than an intentional moral judgment. Now let's contrast this against the other situation, where Light is the only one around and is intentionally trying to kill the assailant. It makes you stop and think for a moment. Hey, murder is definitely bad, but at the same time, Light definitely saved this woman from something terrible. And then, from then on, both you and the main character begin to wrestle with the idea of right, wrong, and morality in general. Immediately after killing his second victim and realizing the power of the Death Note, Light is racked with guilt, and his thoughts echo our own. I killed them both. I really killed two men. Who am I to pass judgment on others? But then, as the days go by, he comes to the personal conclusion that not only is using the Death Note the right thing to do, but that he's obligated by virtue of his character to sacrifice his mind and soul in order to make the world a better place. A conclusion perfectly in line with his character traits that were established earlier throughout the episode. And so at the end of the episode, Light resolves to become the god of the new world, and we're left wondering if this is a god worth serving, and thus begins the series. Thank you so much for watching. This is actually my first video, so if you made it all the way to the end, there's a special place in heaven for you. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe, as that really helps us out. And depending on the reaction to this video, we'll put out more content real soon. See you next time!